Here we are on the air again. For how many times is this made now? Bill, you're keeping track.
No, I'm not, but it's a lot.
It's a lot of times.
We've done this quite a bit.
It's a lot of times.
Yeah.
Let me turn that down. I always get YouTube. So I think I got this right. So this is, I do, Serena Catania. And then Philip Hodgetts.
Hi.
Bill Davis. And me, Richard Taylor. We got a lot to talk about today, all kinds of things. So the first question everybody wants to know is, who's got toilet paper? Would you ever think that would be the first question on a Final Cut Pro Radio TV Live question? But that's what everybody wants to know. So
California's done pretty good logistic.
I heard that,
looks like Phil and I are safe.
Yeah, I heard that. I have it. I haven't bought it from any local store. I just ordered it on Amazon back in February, the regular shipment, and it comes in late, but it just comes in. So I leave the local store stuff for people to get locally. Now,
funny you mentioned that, because I didn't buy any extra when I got quarantined. I had a big thing I got at Costco.
Right.
And I'm going to need to buy some more soon, so I'm wondering where I'm going to get it.
Well, let me tell you.
Yeah?
Apple is making toilet paper. It's called the iSheets.
That's where you were.
Who's got the digital rim shot?
Do I have?
Oh, no, stop.
Here we go. I have. Do I have a rim shot? No, I don't have a rim shot. I got an air horn.
That's not the same thing.
Okay.
Our little complication is that we can't just buy any toilet paper because we're on septic. It has to be, we're like one of two or three brands.
Oh, so. Is that right? I'm on septic. Yeah. I never knew about that.
Oh, no, you've got to use septic safe toilet paper or you'll have issues when you're pumping it out, because if it's not septic safe, it doesn't actually break down. It just sits in the bottom of your septic waiting to be pumped out and reducing the capacity of your tank.
There you go.
People who live on boats or yachts will know that very well. When you have a boat, you have to use septic safe.
Okay, who's lived on a yacht? Not me. I knew Philip has for not a yacht, but you lived on a boat for a little while.
Didn't actually get onto the boat despite everything that was leading up to there. No, I didn't actually. I spent one night overnight on the boat in pre-thing. It was a long disaster. We need not revisit that. But Lumberjack came out of it, so it wasn't all bad.
Right. Well, the one thing I want to mention is that I didn't know you then, but you were coming into Annapolis. You were scheduled to be into Annapolis, and I was going to come down and see you.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
That was 2012.
So how's everybody doing in your part of the world? You guys are all in California, correct?
Oh, yeah.
So how are you individually doing? Serena, how are things at your house?
I've been by myself because I'm, at risk because of my young age. But my daughter and my granddaughter live 6 miles away, so they come once in a while and we have picnics in the yard. I'm doing fine. Most of us who do what we do spend a lot of time alone anyway.
Right. And
I miss the gatherings that happen once in a while. We're going to talk about NAB later, maybe.
Right,
and I actually am missing NAB. But the difference is, as somebody that's like an alpha female, for somebody to tell me I can't do something, then there's that aspect of being quarantined and in this enforced environment, which is a just fine environment, but not when somebody tells me I can't leave it.
Right.
Don't make me do it.
Right.
So that's what I'm going through right now, is that feeling a little bit sleepless in San Diego.
There you go. What about you, Philip?
Honestly, life is hardly different. I mean, apart from reduced shopping, we work from home anyway. We're out in the country anyway. So, we miss Lafsipug. We miss, eating, getting up. But honestly, we'd only go out about twice a month at night. So we don't really see much difference in our life. We're fortunate. I mean, we're self-contained. We're not by ourselves. We're not in a tiny little, New York apartment with kids. I mean, there are so many people worse off, and we're very fortunate. We've got, big open aspect all around, lots of light, and no people, so it's perfect.
Bill?
No, people,
Well, it's very
you have
similar
a great
to me.
house. I love your house.
It's very similar to me. Jane and I, we don't go out. I mean, we used to go grocery shopping once a week, which is what we're doing now. We just don't go out that much to see a band occasionally or a movie or something, but we don't go out that much, so it hasn't really changed dramatically for us other than a little bit, Bill, what about you?
Greg finds it hard to shop just once a week. He was the
was he?
What are we going to have to dinner tonight? Let's go shop. And so
right.
that's where his challenges come.
We have been very, knock wood, incredibly fortunate. I do mostly corporate communication stuff, and so our two largest clients have been in crisis communication mode, which sounds worse than it is. That's just a thing in corporate communications. When you have big systems that you're running and things suddenly can't work normally, and work from home tire thousands and thousands of employees is a crisis for them. So what do? They turn to communicating via video. So we've actually had our business go up. And I'm almost bereft to say that because it's very unusual and we are incredibly lucky. But it feels very much to me like the same thing that happened to us back in 9/11, which is we were preparing a whole bunch of videos that would go into a big conference. And when the conference canceled, at first we thought all our work was going to go away. But in point of fact, they decided to do all those presentations via video and send them to their people back then on VHS or DVD at the best, because that was the transition era back during 9/11. But for us, it just meant suddenly the phone just starts ringing. We've got to get messages out to people. How do we shoot them? What do we do?
Yeah. And I'm actually very pleasantly surprised. We've had no significant downturn in business. Our business is still tracking about what it was last year. I was expecting with, production shut down that we would see a downturn in people buying our software. I think what it really tells me is that how not Hollywood our business is that we're not relying on that end of the market. We've got this group of the market down here that people are interested in using.
My experience has been that business now is video, and it has been for a long time. They just didn't realize it. Now it's just accelerating. And this, I've been on more Zoom meetings and more Skype calls and more. In fact, it's to the point now where I'm living in my voice booth in part because I wired this for being able to do that. So it's such a luxury to have a place where no matter what's happening out there in the real world, just come in, close the door, and you can concentrate. I feel so bad for all of those millions of people we see on TV right now who are trying to suddenly make this work. And I feel so fortunate because I've been doing it for such a long time. And, you see
all
it.
of us are actually, independent of what's affecting so many other people. We're, all four of us are incredibly fortunate that we're already set up for this beforehand, that we're used to working from our homes. And so, compared with people who are massively disrupted, I feel very, very fortunate.
I do too, Philip. And there's one other thing that I've noticed about us. We all have good hair.
That's true.
Because...
Although I am missing Marlon, my friend the only person I've done actually professional video editing for back in 2005. She decided that we were going to remain friends even when the project was finished. So she started cutting my hair, and of course, 15 years later, she's still cutting my hair.
Right.
Except for right now, she's not.
Right.
Yes.
But
did anybody else do the same thing I did, which is buy clippers and look to my wife and say, "Welcome to barberhood."
Easier with Greg
Bill,
Sarah's
don't do that if you've had an argument recently, though. Make sure that you're in friendly terms. You just bought her roses or something.
After the first haircut, she looked at me and said, "You're absolutely fine as long as you back out of every room."
Right. Exactly.
I love cutting hair. Actually, on the set of Stargate, they started calling me the Rainbow Woman because my hair was so many different colors. It was all long and scraggly. And I decided that I would at least learn how to do my own hair. So I've been doing my own hair the last couple months. I do miss Alexi Taryn, who does my hair and makeup when I'm on the stage. But yeah, women, it's harder for us. You have to get up. You have to put lipstick on. I hate lipstick. You have to put it on, I guess.
Well, I was going to ask
Annie
you.
Leibovitz doesn't.
You got up this morning early, but your hair looks great. Did you makeup and everything?
This is wash and wear. I put some lipstick on and some mascara.
Okay. Your hair looks like it's been done.
Yeah.
No, this is wash and wear. It's kind of unruly. That's the Sicilian curly hair.
I see.
So I'm gonna send you a picture. If you want it, Richard, I'm going to send you a picture of my life on the breaking news desk during the Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures at Easter.
Absolutely.
I did a newscast about their reentry into Earth to help save the world from the coronavirus. Anyway, It's hilarious. It's not hilarious, but it's a weird picture. I'm going to send it to you.
Okay.
Just for fun.
So, Philip, I was going to ask you how the software business is during this, but you said it's been better.
Oh, it's been about the same.
About the same.
Yeah. So we're not seeing an appreciable up or down on last year, which is fortunate. I'm very thankful because I was expecting a downturn. But yeah, it's staying fairly constant, which is kind of tells me that our business is more broad spread than just Hollywood. I mean, really, we've known that for a long time. The thing, okay.
Right. So do you have...
I'm busier than I've ever been. Busier inside than I've ever been. And that, for me, as a field producer, director, is really confining. I'm supposed to be in Sicily right now with my crew. So that's hard. And we've all talked about what's going to happen after all of this. Is production going to go back to what it was? And I'm hoping that it will, because I need to finish those assignments. So.
Absolutely. But I have a question. Do you think we're going to see a uptick in production when this is done? I mean, like overtime and stuff. Do you think that's going to happen? Or, I mean, once everything, say in a couple months and things are kind of back to normal and the studios want to get stuff out. I was talking to Chris Fenwick last week, and he said that he thought they weren't going to give anybody overtime. They were just going to make people work longer hours for the same pay. But that doesn't seem fair.
Well, I think that would depend on whether it's a union job or a not union job. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah.
The unions are there for a reason, and those sort of unions, I certainly support.
My guess, and I hate to make this prediction, is that people are going to go out too soon, and it's going to rage back up again, and they're going to have to shut down again, and it's going to be, I think it's going to be a bunch of months before things come to anywhere looking close to normal.
Well, I think each state's going to make up their own mind for the most part.
Yeah, but the problem is there's no walls between the states. So as soon as it pops up.
It's like having a peeing section in the swimming pool.
Well, I heard that expression before. But here's what surprised me during this whole thing is that, L.A. is a very populous city, but L.A. had nothing compared to New York. New York was, I always compare the two, being an East Coaster, that they're both very, millions of people concentrated into cities, but that New York got hit extremely hard, and everybody else is nowhere near what New York was.
I think the answer, and I'm guessing, right? I am not an epidemiologist. And I always, when somebody's talking about this stuff and they're not a medical professional, I always take them with a grain of salt. So whatever I say should be taken with a bag of salt. But the density in New York is unlike most other, except very few cities. So the fact that it's a vertical city and the normal mode of behavior is going from a building in a cab to another building and getting in an elevator and going up to a floor in the building and coming down, all those things make any form of social distancing impossible. So when you've got something that has the transmissibility profile of COVID, that's just asking for rapid, almost logarithmic spread. And I think that's what they've faced. And until they got it into people's heads, you just got to shut it down. They didn't turn things, but they did do that. And so they've turned it a good little bit. But now that's all that does is delay it and give capacity time to address it. It doesn't stop it. And I just don't think it's going to be stopped for a year and a half until as they're saying, the vaccines get tested, vetted, and out.
So who missed NAB?
I missed it, not in terms of didn't go, but missed it in terms of, oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't see all my friends. I'll raise my hand for that, definitely.
Right.
Yeah, me too.
Phil?
Me too. What's happening that's a real burden is all of these virtual seminars that are all of a sudden cropping up everywhere.
Right.
Tutorial here, tutorial there,
right.
meeting here, meeting there, 40 people at once, 120 people at once. And now the NAB virtual press room where all of the companies are doing their own scheduling in terms of what we need to look at. And I'm an information junkie, always have been, love doing research. So I want to try to catch as much of this as possible. But then how do we do our own work in the middle of all of that? So that to me is one of the reasons why I miss NAB, because you've got 1,500 vendors in one place. You can wander around, you can see everything you want to see, get it over in 5 days, and have all of that knowledge and then come home and go back to work. That didn't happen this year. So I miss that. And back to New York really quickly. New York is a melting pot for people from all over the world who come in via the various airports for major conventions. And with the 2-week quarantine and all of that outside potential, like a lot of people come from Italy or Sicily or Europe or, Asia, they come from all over the world. And so there's a lot more chance for exposure that way too, I think. Los Angeles to a certain extent. And we don't really know what the real numbers are. So it's kind of up and down. Anyway, sorry, didn't mean to change the subject. We can go back to NAB.
So what about you, Bill? What about NAB? Did you miss it this year as far as, seeing your friends and stuff?
Yeah, of course. That was, I think I've been saying this for a lot of years, that about 10 years into my run of going to NAB, and I've been going for 20 some odd years, what I finally struck me 10, 15 years ago was that it was not at all about the stuff. Because I went in my first years to see the stuff. That's what you went for. You went to say what new cameras are out here, what mixers, what microphone, whatever. That was, and you'd crawl the halls forever. 10 years or 15 years ago back, the light went on and said it has nothing to do with that stuff. It has to do with the people you meet. And it is that rare and wonderful opportunity for me to sit down at NAB 15 years ago and have a cup of coffee with a guy named Phil Hodgetts, who I had never met in my life, and for us to look at each other in the face, chat a little bit, get some sense of who, and is it somebody that is thinking in ways that can help me, and can I add something into their life perhaps so that we can form this relationship. And then I will have one more person who I can go to when I go, holy crap, how does that work?
Right.
My client wants me to make it work and I don't know how to work. And oh God, it's a metadata problem. Well, I know Phil, and Phil will take my phone call. So, and that is the bond. That turned out to be the single most valuable part of NAB. And so, yes, I miss that. Although I will say that the industry, the shape of it has changed so much and will continue to change so much here over this next year or two, that I was questioning whether I needed to invest, because it costs, listen, for me, even though I've had support from clients and people sent me as a reporter and things like that, it still takes out anywhere from several $100s to a couple of $1,000 out of my cash flow to do an NAB thing just as an individual. I mean, it was not cheap. Hotel rooms are not cheap there. Cabs are not cheap. Even if you monorail everywhere and you eat, the cheapest burgers you can find, they're still going to be $9.50 each.
Right.
So,
well, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
You're going to spend money.
An indication of the way things changed even, many years ago. The first year I came to NAB, I was charged by Digital Media World in Australia to do, NAB reporting, actually, find the news, find the latest information for them in the digital media space. The next year they said, oh, don't worry about that. We can get all of that online, and you just write us a color piece. And so, even between 98 and 99, or was it 99 and 2000, things changed that much.
Right.
That, and now it's like we don't need to be at NAB for the announcements. In fact, one of the things that surprised me is how few announcements we've really had. I mean, we hardly know what Blackmagic are going to ship in September because they didn't announce anything today.
Right. Yeah, I was surprised. So far, the Blackmagic announcement's only been the A10 Mini Pro, and if they announced anything else, no new cameras, or have they?
A price drop on the Pocket 6K.
Oh, yeah, that's a big deal. It's $2,000 for a 6K camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's probably a new one coming. The one thing I'm looking forward to, though, is NAB. If you go to nab.com/express, they on the 13th and 14th of May, they're doing a virtual event where they're bringing a lot of vendors in. And then also FMC's Post-Production World. What's that, the 17th to the 19th of May?
Exactly.
So we will have an opportunity to hear some of these announcements, but and bottom line, when you think about it, how do these announcements really affect us immediately anyway? I just like hearing about them. Last year, this time, remember, Philip, we were doing WWDC radio and bringing 10 people in every day. I loved that I could sit in the booth and everybody was coming in and I got to talk to everybody. I don't know.
Serena, I'm going to come back to one thing you said. They have a new camera coming out.
Oh, they haven't told me that.
Okay.
They haven't told me that. I'm just assuming that whenever a company has a price break on a main product, that indicates that they're trying to get rid of some inventory so that they can bring the new one in. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're just using that as a way of getting attention to it.
Yeah. No, I thought the same thing, but I didn't. I don't have inside scoop like you do.
Well, that's just a historical pattern. I mean, Serena's exactly right. That's a historical pattern that everybody has seen. You go, wow, they dropped that. I should think about it now. And then sure enough, 4 months later, you're going, oh, now I get it. There's a new box.
I think the thing is never buy something because it's available. Buy it because you need it right now.
Right.
If you don't need it, wait for the next version.
And don't buy anything before NAB. That's the other thing.
Absolutely. Well,
absolutely.
But there's another fundamental difference. So this is attempting to do a shift, because it used to be that it was push. All marketing was kind of push marketing, which means that you put an ad together and you send it out and you put it on television and you try to get your 1 or 2% of the market to come in. And because it was broadcast, that was enough to generate your sales and revenue streams. Now the market has changed to pull, right? Which is you pull your phone out of your pocket and you find a solution and you pull it to you. And you don't have to get in the stream of all the push mass media, but it's a wholly different way to get people to the point of the buying decision. And since NAB was the ultimate in push, right? It's bringing all these vendors into a building, but then the individual attendee got to select. No, you're looking at 1,000 booths and you're going, no. Yes, I'm going to walk over there and concentrate my energy here.
It was more. What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? Yes. What do you do? What is that again?
Right.
I have no idea from all your signage. I have no idea what it is.
I agree.
Yeah.
I remember
that was the model of the trade show. And now the problem I see is that even if they're going to try to do these virtual press conferences, am I going to sit here through no as these presentations flood toward me? Without that search back in, without something that says of all the websites initiated with new content by virtue of this event, how do I get to the 10 that matter to me?
Right.
That is difficult. Curation is harder than ever.
It is. And I wonder if there's no NAB in 2020. There's almost certainly no NAB in 2021. So, come 2022, can you get the momentum again?
Right, because things have changed.
Have we all become so used to have we no IBC this year and probably no IBC in 2021 either?
Have they announced that, Phil?
No, but I'm projecting.
Okay.
I mean, I've booked a house tentatively booked a house in Amsterdam just in case.
Okay.
But I don't expect it, and I mean, my host she's concerned whether she'll have to put a permanent rental in there or even sell the property because of the circumstances. So,
well, I doubt that's true.
Regardless, I mean, I don't think we're going to have IBC this year or next, or NAB this year or next. So come 2022, is the momentum going to get rolling again? Are we all going to suddenly start coming to NAB, or will we have found ways of replacing the role that NAB plays in our life with other ways of doing that?
So I hope that we have an FCPX Creative Summit, and I'll tell you how we can do that. There's only 150 of us, plus some of the hands. We can go to Apple campus and get tested. Everybody can get tested. And if you pass the test, then you can go to the Final Cut Pro Creative Summit, right? We'll go to Tim Cook's office, and he'll give us the test, and the Apple test, and then it'll be fine.
Sadly, the problem is asymptomatic transmission.
Well, we'll have to test it for a week.
Yeah.
Well, but that's it. If you're not quarantined and you do that, then you still, after you test, can pick it up and bring it into the enclave.
No, exactly.
So this is going to be really complicated, and it's going to be, I think, longer lasting than people expect. I really hate to say that.
Oh, yeah.
But it's...
Well, I mean, coming back to the point that Bill, you mentioned, I mean, as a vendor, NAB and IBC cost us somewhat, and Super Creative Summit cost us somewhat more than a few $100s. So
yes.
There is there's a significant not expended that's going to be made that is promotional. It should be put into a different form, and if only I knew what that was, and used to get the message out to those 10 people that are interested.
Have any of you, I don't know if any of you, when you go to NAB, have any of you taken the walk back between North and South, or between Central and South halls through the back where all the crates are stored?
Oh, yeah.
The back lot of NAB, the first time you see that, kind of messes with your mind a little bit, because you're realizing that all of the stuff you're seeing in this show floor, which looks big and impressive and fancy, has been in development for a year. Every single demo, these companies have to know ahead of time. They're building these products to be sold next year at NAB, and they're also building the entire supply and demo chain for this. They are working out their presentations, what their booth people are going to see. They're going to figure out how much space they can have for a booth. They're going to figure out what kind of furniture and effects and lighting they need for that booth, and then they're eventually going to pack it up into these these wooden shipping crates. And they're going to put it into the transit system, and it's going to arrive, and then they're going to build it in like a couple of days. And that's been always for me, after I became associated with vendors, to go in like 3 days before NAB, and you're watching this incredible construction effort on the show floor to put this stuff into it.
Greg always said going into NAB before it's ready is like going to NAB in its underwear.
Yes, very much so. And so I'm thinking there was a lot of money lost. When the plug was pulled, vast amounts. At the top end, these big giant brand names, Sony can absorb that, Panasonic can absorb that. It's a marketing loss, but they're going to try to do something like we're talking about with Blackmagic, and Grant's going to say, well, we've got these ATEM minis ready, and that we think that's going to be a really hot product. So let's focus on that, and that'll be a nice cash flow thing that we can generate if we can get them produced and get the ships into America that are carrying the cargo.
Sure,
that's been, I think, the problem with ATEM Mini and now Mini Pro adoption is just that you can buy them, but you can't get them. And that's supply chain. And supply chains were really messed up because a lot of this stuff comes out of China. And so that was the first area hit, and they shut down sending. And now you have, for America, the West Coast is where most of that stuff from the Pacific Rim lands. And so the ports of entry, like Long Beach and these are huge shipping operations that bring stuff into America, and Seattle and all the West Coast cities, they're blocked up because they're sheltering. So they're working on skeleton crews. So the whole thing is just clogged up, I think.
Yeah, I mean, will Sony find a better way of getting the message out to the people that it needs to get the message out to than the $15 million they spend at NAB?
Right.
I mean, $15 million buys you a lot of something else.
Right.
And Avid Countdown, I mean, when Tim Wilson was still working at Avid, he said, they have a clock basically big clock that counts down to NAB all the time because the focus has always been something for NAB. And clearly, the final release of Media Composer 2020, the Catalina compatible release, would have been their big NAB story. but
Right.
Instead, it was released on Monday to relatively little fanfare.
So, Philip, being a developer, I'm not sure if you know the answer. Maybe Greg was. Why did it take Avid so long to become Catalina compatible? I mean, Catalina was out for 6-7 months ago. Why do you think it took so long?
Because they were relatively late to the party to decide how were they going to go in a post-QuickTime world.
I see.
I mean, Adobe, Avid, and everyone else has had to work out how they remove their dependencies on QuickTime, because those products, when they first came out, like everything, I mean, used QuickTime because it was a very easy to use framework to build upon, and sort of Media Composer was built on it on the Mac. Adobe had it, and even video for QuickTime for Windows was part of their solution cross-platform. Now, as that's all become replaced by AV Foundation in Apple's world with a lot tighter control and a lot fewer restrictions, they've all had to go out. Adobe bit the bullet very early on with the Mercury engine, which must be, I guess, 10 years old by now.
Okay.
They took and rewrote an entire media engine, modern media engine for their needs. The same way that Apple wrote a modern media engine rather than a QuickTime engine for Final Cut Pro, they decided to move forward. Avid has traditionally tended to, up until very recently, just ride its laurels, sit on its hands and take the revenue without. They slowly rewrote to get 64-bit compatibility. They didn't rewrite as a 64-bit app until we came to 2020. So they were, for many years under previous administrative leadership, they were seeing how long they could go without spending money. And then, by the time they did make that decision, it's too late to actually be contemporary and make the goals of getting something ready for Catalina when Catalina was out.
Okay. Well, that makes complete sense then. I didn't realize I never thought about that, but I remember the issue with Avid Media Composer and some of their legacy codecs that they still have. So the other thing is, in the news for like the last week, people have been talking about Final Cut Pro on the iPad. I mean, it's based on one person's post that I saw on Twitter, but apparently he has a pretty good track record on some things. But he didn't say it's coming out now. He says within the next year or so. Yeah,
but his the point that he used as a reference point was that Xcode was coming to an iPad.
Right.
It's an irrelevancy. It's a complete and absolutely irrelevant. Every iPad app has been written on Mac OS up to this point. Every single iPad app has been written on Mac OS. So whether Xcode comes to iPad or not is irrelevant to whether Apple would do an iPad version of Final Cut Pro 10. The question I always come back to this is, what's in it for Apple? What's the strategic advantage over iMovie flowing through to Final Cut Pro 10, over Luma Fusion? Yeah, I get confused because logically Luma Fusion should be the company and Luma Touch should be the product, but it's actually the other way around. So
yeah.
Thanks, but so I'm getting internally confused with it. So there's already a very good solution in the marketplace, one that the Pro Apps team are extremely aware of and working closely with, based on one conversation, and I'm just not sure where the big advantage for Apple is to split the development arrangement. How much slower do you want the development of Final Cut Pro 10 on Mac OS to go in order to have Final Cut Pro 10 on iPad? And that's a very serious question.
Oh, of course. No, I don't want it delayed at all.
Well, and then stop encouraging them to do iPad, because they're not going to make the tank twice as big.
No. Well, so this.
If I were Apple, I would buy Luma Touch and conform it a little bit more.
It's $30.
No, but I mean, I think that I would want that technology within my umbrella, because they're working very well together now. I mean, I think they have a good relationship, but they have so much money. I would want to own it. I would want to own it, and I would want to integrate it into all of my marketing and somehow create a collusion between the two. That's just my thought.
Apple will buy things that are strategically important to Apple. I don't see that as being strategically important to Apple. They buy technologies to either control them or because they have a use for them within their ecosystem. They haven't been in the pattern of buying fully formed apps for at least a decade, probably closer to 15 years. So, their big buy-up was in the early 2000s. So I just haven't seen them. They haven't come to us, so why are they going to buy someone else?
Well, yeah, I asked them that very question. And they weren't sure if they would sell. They don't have to because they're not a publicly traded company. They really like.
Of course not.
They said they would consider. They would look at the offer and consider it, but they said they did laugh a lot when I asked them that question. I'm sure I'm not the first person to ask them, but they said they would consider it, but they really like the small team that they have, the ability they can do what they want without any corporate interference. And if Apple comes in, it's like control.
They would get swallowed up and they would have to move on to something new. And they're wonderful people with a great product. And I think Apple is working very well in conjunction with them.
Yes.
There's not an adversarial relationship
Not
there.
at all. Not at all.
But Apple, from what I have noticed, is becoming more and more involved in the mobile filmmaking space and promoting that quite heavily. And the one missing piece is, yes, they have iMovie, but iMovie has its restrictions. It's great. I was using it 4 years ago or 5 years ago at CES heavily because I could just work on my iPad. I could shoot on my iPad. I could edit on my iPad. I could throw in some of that awful music that I happened to have at the time, add some titles, and then sit down in the booth and upload it, and it would be published. So LumaFusion is an amazing product, and there's a good relationship there. So I don't know. Why don't you book both Philip and I in 2 years, and we'll see what has happened.
Okay, I'm booking you right now to send you the date right now, and we'll keep it active.
Somebody on one of my feeds posted a thing from, I think it was like about 1984, 85. And at the point, the marketing guru, I can't remember, there's Macula or somebody else at Apple, had a simple bullet point of corporate philosophy. And one of the things that Apple said was very important to them, and I think that's still part of their culture, was focus. Don't try to do everything. Focus on what you think you can do extraordinarily well, and then leave everything else aside. And I thought that was extremely good advice. It means don't try to make 10 devices, just make the best iPod that you possibly think you can, and sink or swim based on how well you do with that.
Okay,
and
Bill,
the same thing with everything else.
I'm going to talk to the people who made this mouse.
Oh, tell me about it, please.
I want to talk to the people who designed this mouse.
Here's my conspiracy theory. I think they realized as soon as they created the touchpad that mice were stupid. And that the best way to get everybody off mousers, was to make them so stupid that everybody was going to have to flee them in massive things. And that's a tactical stop using bars of soap to compute with scream. That's personally.
I want an Apple mouse that has the roller bar on it. Remember the old Kensington Mises mice?
Everybody, I know that's a hard plural. Everybody has that, but I got to tell you, I stupidly, accidentally, because of just a series of weird things, because Final Cut wouldn't run in the early days on my big desktop system, and I had a slightly newer laptop, and it would. So I started doing my very first Final Cut 10 back in 2011, when I just first started playing with it. I had to use it on my laptop. Changed my entire computing life. And I think for a little while I was switching my mouse back and forth and thinking, will this be better? But over a very brief period of time, particularly since I was in coffee shops and stuff like that, and I don't want to mess with dragging along the mouse, I just started converting my brain to touchpad. And I haven't touched a mouse in probably 7 or 8 years.
Seriously?
I just don't miss it.
Yeah.
Seriously,
Huh.
I have not touched a mouse in at least that long.
Unless it's on somebody
I don't
else's
like
system.
touchpads unless I'm using an Apple Pencil. If I'm using a pencil,
I don't want.
for
I
graphics,
maybe
yeah. Can I go
everything
back to
hands on the home row.
really quick?
Sure.
It just occurred to me, and I'm sorry, I'm a woman, so I'm multitasking thoughts. maybe the real relationship between Apple and Luma Touch would be to integrate them into the ecosystem like they did with Frame.io. So that's just a thought.
I'm going to point out that we make two apps that are one app that's absolutely crucial to Apple. Send to 10. They at various times they've encouraged us to drop the price. They were involved in the pricing decision in the first place. If something that crucial has been left to a third party to develop in tight conjunction with Apple, but to develop as a third party, makes me really, really suspicious that they would go on something that is not essential to their ecosystem and purchase it. I think it's exactly the philosophy is that which is absolutely essential to getting Apple moving forward and owning the technologies that underpin everything, versus buying up apps that are important to their ecosystem. We had to face this recently. There was a little something went on where we may have had to consider a buyout offer, which gets you thinking about a whole lot of things associated with that and what you'd be doing in the future and what your contributions are. And it was like, well, if those apps, they weren't necessarily crucial to the potential purchaser, what if those apps were simply dropped from the ecosystem? What would be the response from Apple and Adobe and Atomos? Those translation tools are essential to those three companies, in one way or the other. I mean, Atomos use 10-CC as the only way to get their XML from their devices to Premiere Pro, which is now that they're doing multicam runs into a problem. But
so
our problem's not yours.
So speaking of Atomos, one of the questions I had was, what's going on with ProRes RAW? It was introduced 2 years ago at NAB. Since then, we just now saw the first camera that records ProRes RAW internally. It just announced this last week, but it's an expensive $12,000 camera. So is it, I keep hearing it's the Red RAW patent that's preventing it from being recorded in cameras, something to do with that, or it hasn't been adopted that extensively besides the Atomos recorders. Do you know why?
Well, Red has Red RAW, Arri has Arri RAW, Blackmagic has Blackmagic RAW. Who's left?
But it doesn't seem like it's gone very far. It doesn't seem
I mean, but again, Arri have already got an investment in Arri RAW.
I see what you're saying. You're saying it's already saturated.
Red has got Red RAW. Blackmagic have got Blackmagic's par-baked RAW. There's not many people left to actually implement ProRes RAW in camera because they already have their own competing codec. And
so basically 4 major video players took a run at becoming the dominant RAW codec, and they all didn't jump out.
Well, Red didn't license it to anybody else. Arri didn't license it to anybody else. Blackmagic will let anybody else use it if they want to. I mean, there are open APIs for it. So the decisions are not related to technical ability, and probably not even Apple's licensing, but really to the sake of why would Blackmagic implement ProRes RAW? Why would Arri implement ProRes RAW? It costs them money to do that. There'd be a licensing agreement have to be entered into. It's like, I just don't see the why people would pick it up.
But
I think the key there is the source, which is the cameras.
Right. But the Blackmagic already records ProRes, and doesn't Arri already record ProRes? It wouldn't just be an extension of that license to add RAW?
Actually, no, because you would have to rejig to. At the moment, it goes through the RAW phase, then it gets processed into ProRes.
Okay.
Well, that RAW phase is being encoded into Arri RAW. RAW being the sensor data with no processing coming off and being encoded or being recorded into a video signal. So if you don't have that raw sensor data, you can't really transcode it. You could in theory transcode if you knew the parameters on both sides and the sensors on both sides, and you have to write a translation for each sensor to translate it.
I see.
It's a difficult job, and you can't ever go from Blackmagic par-baked back to a true RAW because it's already been slightly processed. So,
are we going to see B-RAW in Final Cut Pro at some point? Because people have been asking for that. They've been asking for that. People that like the B-RAW, the Blackmagic RAW camera, the 4K and the 6K, but they want to edit in Final Cut Pro.
Apparently, it's Apple's decision.
So that's what I've heard.
And you've also got to remember that with a company Apple's size, nothing happens in less than 2 years.
Okay.
I mean, basically, it takes from the moment that they decide they want to implement a feature before it's released to the public is 2 years in very round terms. In the old Final Cut Pro days, it was 3 years. So consider yourself lucky. I mean, and we implemented at Apple's request, we implemented iXML in Sync and Link exactly 2 years before they implemented it directly in Final Cut Pro 10, because they asked us to do it when they became aware of the need, and 2 years later they were able to implement it themselves. It took Greg less than a week.
I'll be darned.
Yeah. So Apple will often let third parties fill in the gaps until they can, and sometimes permanently, like with the translation tools, and Sync and Link, and Cinema tools. They're not Cinema tools, but change lists. These are very niche products that it would be ridiculous for Apple to actually work on, because it would be a waste of resource. It would be taking away from features that Richard could actually use. Because I guarantee you don't use a change list tool. An interesting point, we sell the change list tool for Final Cut Pro 10, and we sell a change list tool for Premiere Pro. Premiere Pro sells slightly more than Final Cut Pro 10, but not as much as a disparity as you would think from the publicity.
And what about the support for Premiere versus Final Cut for that product?
It's exactly the same engine.
It is, okay.
Yeah, in fact, because of the editorial schedules, they released differently, but Focus and Gone Girl were in post at the same time, and they were the features that we developed that tool for Apple for Focus, and for Adobe for Change List for Gone Girl. Funny little background story is that I was good friends with Al Mooney, who was a product manager of Premiere Pro at the time, and we'd been working on the Change List tool for Apple. And it's an inconsequential coda to another email I was writing. He said, by the way, if you ever need a change list tool, we've got your back. And that's all I said. And I got a phone call the next morning. He said, so has there been a little bird whispering? And I said, I know nothing. I have not heard anything. He said, what an incredibly big coincidence, because we were just considering whether we should dedicate internal resources to that project or not. And they never did.
So when I was
serendipity, Philip.
When I was at
that's a window into the corporate thinking, right? They were having the meeting to consider whether or not to consider
Yes.
the feature to allocate human and corporate resources to it, which has a cost and ends up on your P&L department and stuff like that. And then that's not even starting to design what the thing will look like. That's just deciding if you're going to maybe think about doing the thing.
Yeah, and it's ironically is the most complex tool that Greg has worked on, and it's the one that will never pay back its investment. Never.
And speaking of that, Philip, is Greg working on any new apps?
Not any new apps. Half his time goes to supporting our existing apps. So one of the reasons, one of the things that we have to always think about when we consider a new app is how much support is this going to require?
Sure.
But they're always working on new features. I mean, the number one feature I'd love to implement right now is true collaboration within Builder, like it's Pages style, so that people be working on the exact same document and at the same time.
Sure, that'd be huge.
I think that, we've designed various ways of using keywords to build story beats and so on. It's like, I think that's all fun and very clever. I think collaboration is actually something that people will use.
Yes.
We've got to be very careful that we don't create clever features when there are actually workable features. I mean, and we're honing in on a solution for multicam into Premiere Pro. We're getting a better understanding of how Premiere Pro really deals with multicam as sequences, not as clips.
Okay.
Which is a very important distinction. It's been limiting the output from Builder back into Premiere Pro when it comes to multicam sequences, and it's been a bugaboo in the translation from Final Cut Pro 10 to Premiere Pro. So there are always ongoing projects and always maintenance.
So when I mentioned ProRes RAW before, Serena was going to say something, and then she stopped. Final Cut Pro and B-RAW and Final Cut Pro. Without getting in trouble, do you think that's a possibility, Serena, that could possibly be happening?
Well, I think there are workarounds for it now anyway. I mean, you can process your media through their encoder, and then you can import it into Final Cut and work on it. I do think that there are going to be, it would seem like it should be, put it that way, in the future. I don't know for sure.
Hey, can I change subject a little bit, because something
Sure.
fascinating crossed my bow the other day. I saw a series of posts in one of the Final Cut groups, and the editor, one of the editors from Saturday Night Live, who had been cutting stuff for the show last week for the From Home Saturday Night Live, popped up and said, "Well, I just had my second piece get into the Saturday Night Live stream, and it was cut on Final Cut 10." And it surprised me a little bit, because we always thought of big operations, and NBC is certainly a big operation, as being interested in saying, this is the tool you will use, this is what we use, this is our standard. If you want to play in our sandbox, use these tools. Apparently, with the way that COVID and the rest of this decentralization and everybody working from home is affecting the world, some outlets are saying basically, what we want is content. What we want is content that meets our specs and is good, and we don't really care about the tools you use. So to me, that was emblematic of the fact that this old centralized production method is taking a giant hit right now, because editors have to work from home, and asking them to edit on certain platforms and may be harder than we're asking them to work on others. So, things like Resolve and Final Cut 10, which have a very efficient editorial pipeline, may be getting more traction for certain editors than some of the tools like Avid. And I don't know enough about Premiere to know where it fits in there, but I just know that the editors that I'm seeing on these chat groups are saying, we're having a hell of a time trying to work from home. We don't have good workflow systems to integrate with other editors from our little isolated pods as the guys who
Right.
cut the show.
Right.
And others are saying, yeah, it's not a problem. Just,
Well, Buna Murray, who produced a lot of reality television, deployed within a week. Their CEO saw what was coming, and before the lockdown happened, they said basically to all of their editors, grab your system from your desk and take it home. And in that time, they sourced 120 20 terabyte disks and graded across all of the media that each editor would need to have 120 copies of that media, and it was all distributed very quickly. We will see a lot more movement towards working at home. I reckon
Right.
that at the end of this, there'll be two people. There'll be, my God, I have to get back to the office because I cannot stand being at home with everybody anymore. I need to get out of here. I need to have that second space. But there'll be probably equally as many people say, can we keep doing this forever?
Right. Right.
And I think companies like Buna Murray will allow people to have that flexibility, because honestly, the more that you can outsource back to the home, the lower your real estate costs are going to be.
Exactly.
One Silicon Valley company is looking at saving $20 million a year in rent, or $12 million a year in rent, simply by having everybody distributed back into the home.
Not only
Right.
rent, but even you don't have to pay unemployment insurance if somebody's working in their house, and liability insurance and stuff. I wouldn't imagine, right?
Well, they'd still be a full-time employee.
Well, I don't mean unemployment. What I meant was workman's compensation.
I think that you'd still have to pay that because they'd be a full-time employee.
So
But Richard, your point is exactly right. This societal change is going to ripple through all sorts of industries that are not immediately understandable.
Right.
Look, my car insurance people, who I loathe slightly less than all the other car insurance people, sent me we're being wonderful. We're changing your bill because obviously no one's going to be driving. And so we're taking $30 a year off of your rate.
I think we got 50. I think we got 50.
God, you guys tried to get it, but you didn't get it. If I'm driving 1/100th of the amount that I used to drive, I'm not interested in a 1.3% reduction in what I'm paying you to cover that. Yeah. That is irrational. But but all of these industries, I mean, you said the words real estate, right?
Yeah.
The past history was we're going to build a 30-story building and then we're going to build 10 stories of underground parking underneath it. If nobody's going to those buildings, what the hell are you going to do with those parking garages? they're just sitting there. And then, autonomous driving is still percolating in the background of life. And what happens if the cars are all little remoras and they're just rolling around, going where they're needed when they're needed? You've still got all concrete under all these cities that suddenly is having fewer and fewer and fewer purposes as existing as people's habits change. And that stuff is going to be way bigger than most of the little things I think that we're currently focused on.
Boy, I must be an eternal optimist because I think we're going to get back to something very similar to what we had before. But I think the cultural mores have changed. I think there's more of an appreciation of family and friends and back to farming and local produce and taking care of your home. And
sure, absolutely.
That's good. And that's going to change the way we do business, but we still have to do business. We're in a society here in the United States that promotes commercialism, and we need those businesses to survive. I think there's going to be a change in the way we look at them and perhaps a change in the corporate culture. I'm hoping that we will become, as corporations, more altruistic. And I'm a very big proponent. Oh, and Philip's laughing.
You are optimistic. I mean, when?
I really believe that
no corporation has ever been altruistic without a whip on their back.
Well, you know what? I have USAA for car insurance and for all my insurance, and I really like those guys. I like the company. I like the way they treat veterans and their families, and that's a company that I believe has at a very high level a good corporate culture. But back to the working from home, I do like it, and a lot of what I do is viable here at home. But if I'm producing something for network television, I want to go into that mixing stage, and I want to be there with the sound engineers, and I want to hear every tone and be involved in that. And I can't get that from my home. There's somebody that can work on it remote, yes, and then send it back to me. But there's also something about the process of being on those actual stages. And now Philip's going to ask me, well, how much of that have you been doing in the last few years? And I'm going to say, not as much as before.
And I'm not
but because I'm working on independent documentaries now, but I sure would love to do what I've done in the past, which is hire a studio, get a really good rate for all of the post-production services, get an office at that studio, and they do it for documentary filmmakers. If you have relationships, you can do that. And there's something about being in that family that I really miss. Maybe
it's great, but it's going to take a while for people to adapt.
Yeah,
I firmly believe this. Yeah. Go ahead, Phil.
I think there's going to be a huge resurgence. I think when all this is over, everybody's going to want to catch up on what they haven't done. And so there's going to be there will be, in stores and in driving, and some of these support industries are going to show an upsurge, supply and demand. Once we're out of our enforced imprisonment, which it feels like, we're going to be going out into the world, and we're going to want to experience and buy what we need in order to bring our lives back to what they were. I don't know. I'm not an economist, but I really feel we're going to be okay. It's going to take a while. I think it's going to take years to recover from this recession that we're in. 26 million people in the United States have filed for unemployment. And the four of us are incredibly lucky that we can do our business. We can manage our businesses from home to a great percentage.
Right.
So
I just like
Philip,
to put
I'm sorry.
A counterpoint in that, even if the entire studio business went back to where it was, it is not driving this industry. I made the point earlier in the Hollywood around the world, metaphoric Hollywood and its ilk around the entire world are shut down. Our business hasn't dropped.
Well, I'm talking about New Hollywood, which includes Netflix and all the SVOD services. I consider that part of Hollywood.
And it's
but
still
look what they did after Tiger King. Did you guys see? Did you see the follow-up to Tiger King? The special?
No.
They because the producer couldn't leave his home, they sent iPhones to everybody that they interviewed who was on the show.
Okay.
And they produced 45-minute show using clips from Tiger King and wonderfully shot interviews with all of the principals. And so that perhaps is a new format, but they took advantage of the disadvantages. You know, they took lemons and made them into lemonade. And so I think that we as creatives are so resilient and so imaginative that we will always find a way to dig ourselves out of these holes that we get into.
And I'm coming back to the same argument that I have with Serena all the time. The film and television,
I love you, Philip.
The film and television production industries, for all of their publicity, for all of the prominence they get, are unimportant to every company. No editing company could survive on that industry.
You mean independent editing company?
Well, okay, so let's take it back, though.
Let me finish.
You were talking. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's all finish.
Yeah. You know, for there are somewhere around 400 feature films released in the United States a year. There's about 2,000 hours of original television produced a year, or 2,000 companies producing original television. Let's round that up to 100,000 editors in total around the world producing all of that content. Final Cut has sold over 3 million seats of Final Cut Pro 10. Adobe probably have about 1.8 million active seats of Premiere Pro. Blackmagic have about probably 500,000 active seats of Resolve. And there's about 120,000 active seats of Media Composer, which could be a good proxy for the film and television industry. My point is, even if that industry went back to where it was, it is not important to the wider world of production. That is everything else. It's all the stuff that Bill does. It's all of the stuff that people make for education, television, reporting. All of these other things that are not studio based, that are our market. We couldn't survive on what we sell to high end production. Those apps just don't make enough money. We do them.
So let me jump in, and I want to slip back because Serena mentioned something I think that does touch everybody, and that's food, right? So here's the little thing that I see. You had a distribution system that was big and robust and in place, right? We have grocery stores, we have supermarkets, we have little neighborhood markets, we have mini marts on a lot of the corners, and everybody understood this system. This is where do we go to get stuff. So if I want bananas for my family, I'm probably going to go to the grocery store. If I want a banana for a snack, I may stop at the convenient mark. Everybody understood that, right? So this comes along and that crushes down. And one of the first things that happened, which I thought was wonderful, and it ties exactly into what Serena loves, and I do too, which is, I got connected to somebody who knew the local farmers, and they're going to put together boxes. And if you put a $20 bill in an envelope on your thing, they will deliver a box of fresh produce. And so I thought, let's try it. I got a $20 bill. Let's put it out there. And sure enough, it arrived, and it was magnificent. I mean, such great quality. There was a variety. It was delicious. Linda, who is a very good cook, was over the moon. And so a couple of weeks later, we did it again. And then a couple of weeks later, we did it again. And then the reality struck me, which was suddenly we went from the exploratory phase to this is now my source for fresh things. And we had too much. And we started wasting. We couldn't find a way to use two things. And there was no system where we could go in and say, I just need 3 bananas. I don't need a bushel of bananas. I don't need this many apples. But there is no infrastructure to manage that better system. And that's where I think we are right now with tons of things in society. I think what we do, this whole technological thing, has to go through that same push and pull and tug. You have to say, okay, we're going to do Zoom from the office, and you go into it, and it's a massive mess. And then the second time, it's a little less massive mess. And it's the third and fourth and fifth and sixth and seventh. You start refining it and getting it to be something that's actually useful. And people have to learn, Oh, okay, we're on Zoom. We have a chat function. We have a Q&A function. But there's a place for just raising your hand when you're one of 100 people on the screen, so that the person controlling the Zoom feed can figure out whether you're next or not. All that stuff is just in flux right now. And until it settles down exactly like how I get my lettuce is barely starting to settle down, it's not going to be an equivalent solution to what we had before. And in the midst of this chaos, all you can do as an individual is just try to increase your understanding and capacity little by little, forgive your mistakes, and try. The worst thing I think you can do is just to say, okay, I got my Zoom meeting to working, and I'm just a watcher, so that's all I'm going to do. Then I'm going to go back and hide, because parts of this will become the new normal. And the people who are prominent and who come up will be the people who understand how to make this stuff work better than average. So, and I'm getting off my soapbox. That was enough.
Well said, Bill. Are we about to sign off, or can I ask a Final Cut feature question?
No, we're not ready to sign off yet, and we want to talk about some Final Cut Pro stuff for sure.
Good.
One of the things, and we've talked about this before, I'm completely self-taught on Final Cut. I use it every day of my life, but I'm always learning about new features.
Right.
One of the annoyances that I have is when I go to share and to create a master file or to move something to another location, I've in the past, because I didn't know any better, had to input every time the title and the description and the tags and everything, until I discovered that there is a way to do this automatically and assign it within your library. So, oh gosh, now that I have this open, I can't find it. Hang on a second.
Save custom effect.
Well, no, it's in the
Share.
It's in the share tab.
Share attributes up at the top.
Destination.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can go into your, it's right next to the, hang on a minute, because within that box, you can add a default menu, and you can add a default title and description. And so that every time you share that particular project, it's got all of your tags are the same, all of your descriptions are the same. You don't have to re-enter it every time. And I love that feature. The problem is in the tags section of it, you can only add a whole string of single words, and you can't add separate tags. In other words, when you're on the
comma,
can you
put a comma between them?
I tried. It won't do it on mine.
Well, it should. It's supposed to work if you put a
What
comma.
about tab? Tab doesn't work either.
No, tab doesn't work.
Tried tab, tried
only a comma. Only a comma will work.
Okay.
Yeah. For some reason on mine, it is not working. So maybe, and I've tried restarting, and I have Final Cut. Let me tell you what version I'm in. I love this feature
10.5?
though. I've got 10.4.8.
10.5.
Do I need to update?
Yeah.
Maybe 10.5 will help me. Okay.
That's interesting. I'll look into that, Serene, and see what I can. I use the. I make custom destinations with specific things like H.264 or the high quality version of it in certain sizes, but I never tried the tags. I never did the tags themselves. So.
Yeah, I just like being able, whenever I share from a certain library, anything in that library, the title might be different depending on which project it is, but I want the title, the description, the tags. The tags are the same pretty much for everything that you output from within that library. And you can do that. You can assign that automatically and embed that into your library. I love that. It just the tag section of it was not working. I tried the commas. And so I ended up with Justin Thompson, OWC Radio, Other World Computing. Everything was one name, one, just one word on a long string. Now, what I have to do is see what happens to that once I actually do share it. But Philip, it wasn't working for me. The commas weren't working.
They're supposed to.
Yeah,
Oh,
they should.
no.
So it's a bug report, it's a bug report, not a feature request.
There you go.
Okay. Okay.
There's
well,
a
that
good
was my
philosophical question. Can you ever learn entirely something as deep as Final Cut? Because, so I started hour one, right, when Final Cut 10 came out. I spent a lot of time learning it myself. Then I went through 3 certification courses through the Apple testing just to make sure that there were areas of it that I never touched from my regular work. And then I'm now almost, this is 9 years I've been working daily producing video with it. And I think I probably know 65% of how it works. I think Phil probably knows 80
Less.
and Greg
Less.
probably knows 90. Well, they know deeper stuff, certainly.
Certain things in greater depth, but I postulate that overall, you who use it every day on a variety of different projects are probably exposed to more of Final Cut than I am.
So if in my use profile I am only, and let me be even more realistic about it, maybe I'm at 60 or 70% of understanding how to make everything in 10 work correctly for me. Yeah. That means that everybody out there who's saying, I think I'm an expert, I know it, we all have these holes. We all know what we do and the part. And that becomes the difficult thing. I find things all the time. I learned 3 things last week about how it works after 9 years.
I know. Steve Bays was talking about audio rolls, and I have never used that feature, and it has been amazing this past week.
And there's a whole world. You can spend 2 years learning how to be a rolls ninja in 10 because it's a little bit like
not
the keywords.
The rolls, the lane. Audio rolls.
Audio lanes. Okay.
Lanes. Right. Those
but
ones.
All part of the same complex audio system. I said all the time that you can just, in terms of keyword strategies, just in the browser, you could spend 3 or 4 years just trying to refine that and never go anywhere else because
like
a lot
Photoshop.
of people do a lot of
It's
Photoshop.
Yeah.
Pardon? Oh. Yeah, that's true, Philip. That's true.
Honestly, I found out just the other day something about one of our translation apps that I didn't know. So,
yeah. Expertise is a funny moving target. You can never, there's always somebody who went down a slightly different path to get between point A and point B and learn something that I've never seen. Yeah. That's cool.
Every time I see Steve Martin or Mark Spencer demonstrate, feature in Final Cut Pro 10, it's like, wow, I didn't know that.
I learned that about my second or third NAB that Apple participated in. I think it was Steve Martin along with a panel up on stage demoing something. And at that point, I'd been with Final Cut, maybe it had been out 2-3 years, and I thought I was pretty good at it. And I was going, yeah, I know that. Yeah, okay, good. I'm pretty good with this program. And then all of a sudden it was like, wait, what did he just do? I had no clue that was possible. And it would completely change that section of my workflow. And I just think that for me as an individual, that is still happening to me to this very day.
Yeah.
So is everybody on Catalina?
No.
I am.
I'm on 10.15.3 though, or 10.5.3, whatever it is, 15.3.3. But I've heard 10.15.4 is causing kernel panics and stuff to the point where Steve Martin went on Twitter and called it a POS.
Oh.
Which is unusual because Steve Martin's pretty laid back. Well, I'm just saying because he was frustrated because he was getting kernel panics after he updated to 10.15.4. So I wonder if that's. I've heard that problem before with kernel panics, so I'm staying on 10.15.3. Things are running smoothly.
I just realized my laptop out here in the voice booth is 10.14.6. That's how far back I am because it's in my old laptop, and I just repurposed it to my Zoom and Skype sessions out here.
Right.
Philip, you and I had this conversation last week, and you showed me a way to double check which features, which applications would no longer work under Catalina, and that was frightening.
You had a lot of them?
To look at the list of the programs that I would now not be able to use. And you want to explain that, Philip? Because I thought that was a really good advice that you gave me. You go into About This Mac.
Yeah.
System preference. Let's see, About This Mac. And then you go into your
system report.
Yeah, your system report. And from there, you go into, where do we go from there? I can't remember.
Software applications.
Yeah, software applications. And there you get...
It's going to take a little while.
Take a while.
Because it has to go through every app I've ever installed on my computer.
Right.
A lot.
And I've actually got Final Cut Pro Classic running under Mojave with what was it, retroactive. Because occasionally I want to look at that. Yeah, within that application, software applications list, you can then sort by 32-bit or 64-bit, and anything that's 32-bit is not going to run in the future. So I've got.
You'll see very clearly which applications will no longer work under the new version of Catalina. And so for that reason, I decided to wait, because there were some applications in there that I really need that I'm not going to, particularly, Richard, you'll appreciate this, for some of the movie tools that you use with Ecamm Live and Ecamm, they're not going to work anymore. So the convert to AAC or AIFF, convert to MP3, those, I don't know that Ecamm, now there was an update to Ecamm, a big update yesterday.
3.5, right.
If it's now different. Yeah. But I wanted to call those guys and say, hey, if I convert to Catalina, am I going to lose these features? Because I literally use them every day.
Right.
In one way or another. So it's interesting to go through this list. Now,
but I'm gonna argue a little bit. I'm gonna argue a little bit that you're trading comfort for efficiency, perhaps. And that can be a good trade to make if that's what you value. I have this machine, which is still old, but I haven't used it very much. I just repurposed it for these live calls. But I'm on Catalina in my main editing rig. And when I bought my 16-inch MacBook Pro a month and a half ago, I just said I'm biting the bullet and I'm going to go clean forward, because it is a new world and it's time. And so I looked for and dumped every 32-bit app. I installed brand clean on the machine with nothing on it, and I've been building up. And yes, I did lose some 32-bit programs that I liked in the past. But things are incredibly fast, incredibly smooth. I very seldom crash, and I'm just pumping out a boatload of high-stress work right now with no problems whatsoever. So for me, efficiency in this world of crisis communications and clients saying, we got to get the CEO and we got to shoot him and get on the air right now because this is important. And to be able to, shoot on Thursday and have it on broadcast locally through the big network affiliates in 3 days is worth its weight in platinum. And that's what keeping up gets you.
Here's the good news, Philip. Since you and I looked a week or two ago, most of the 64-bit column is yeses, including, which wasn't there before, which was a big scare for me on my admin machine, was QuickBooks. Now QuickBooks 2020 now works 64-bit. So most of the ones that I was afraid of have now converted since I checked.
Yeah, so I've got to pay yet again for QuickBooks. I really dislike that company.
I know, but you know what? I do too. But I've tried.
What's coming. What's coming for you if you don't upgrade is sooner or later something mission critical you need to run going forward is not going to run.
Yeah.
Make sure you do a backup of your hard drive before you update. I mean, I have a bootable backup before I do that. So,
good idea.
Your lips to God's ears. Your backup strategy must be robust and safe.
And Thunderbolt 3 now.
Can break.
And Thunderbolt 3.
Oh gosh, I know.
That's the other thing. Not USB or FireWire. Thunderbolt 3 connectivity. So it's really, really fast.
How many converters do you guys have? Thunderbolt 2 to Thunderbolt 3. I think I have about 6 of them.
I have 3 or 4.
I needed to. I found an old DV tape that has some content on it that a friend would like to see. And it's like, well, I'd have to go Thunderbolt 3 to Thunderbolt 2 to to a FireWire adapter.
Yeah.
And
FireWire
then actually, what software am I going to use to capture it with? And then I started looking at that and I thought, hey, my friend Les Perkins has got a functioning Final Cut Pro 7 system, which is his only system. He basically said, I'm retiring instead of updating to anything new. So it's like, when this is all over and we can go visit friends again, I'm going to go back in time to capture some DV over FireWire.
Yeah,
You can borrow one of my G4s if you want.
There you go. I have an old
on
MacBook Pro with FireWire 800 on it, and Final Cut Pro 7. I booted it up one
the
time.
camera's going to have FireWire 4-pin, and that's going to have FireWire. So you're always going to have.
That was then the right adapter cable from the from the FireWire 800 to the mini one that's on the camera.
I have all those. I have all those for sure.
I suspect my friend in Burbank's going to be a little bit more convenient.
There you go.
One other question. Can I ask another question?
Yes, you can.
These are little dilemmas that I'm living through. I just realized that in this new setup at home, I don't want all of my RAIDs in the same room where I do my work, or especially where I'm recording. So I have them in another room. I want to be able to cable longer than 6 feet, Thunderbolt 3. And finding those cables is difficult. OWC has a copper cable that can go up to, I think, 50 feet or 30 feet. It's $300. Have any of you run into that problem, needing a Thunderbolt 3 cable that's longer than 6 feet?
No.
If it's active, it should work.
It's active. It's bi-directional. It's, it seems to be worth it. I'm probably going to buy it and try it.
But you can, but the other person, ask Gary Adcock. He'll know. I have him on the show.
Yeah?
Yeah, Gary Adcock will know.
I'm writing down Gary. All right,
sure,
Gary,
he'll
you're
know.
going to get
But I think as long as it's active, I think you'll be okay for 50 feet. Plus, OWC should know, right? You know those guys.
Yeah, they have it. They're not actively promoting it.
I see.
I don't know why. Maybe perhaps they don't realize that we do need it. But if you're going to work in multiple rooms, my IT guy can't come in here and wire all this stuff for me. So, I upgraded to 1G so that I could be faster when I'm recording live. And I just really, it took a minute, but I talked my Spectrum rep into running an Ethernet, a really long cable from the front of the house to the back of the house, so that now, using the OWC dock, I have my Ethernet cable plugged directly into through the dock to my MacBook Pro, rather than using wireless. So that really helps.
Well, that's what I was wondering.
Cables.
Can you use Ethernet 10 gig E to get to your RAIDs? Some kind of conversion? I don't know.
I can, except that I lent it to RB High School and I haven't gotten the box back.
That's
lending my equipment out.
That is the nicest kind of user error.
Yeah, that's a different kind of technical question.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you've had Gary on the show. Bring him back
Multiple
on and
times.
let's ask him about cables.
Yeah, I was going to bring him back on for NAB. He talks about Thunderbolt all the time. He's a big Thunderbolt person, so he'll definitely know the answer. Yeah, I'm pretty good so far I have a studio upstairs and downstairs, and I haven't really connected the two that efficiently. I'm not even sure how to do it myself. I have RAIDs up here. Do I want to connect them downstairs? I don't know. I get these little Thunderbolt 3 drives and even USB 3.1 drives that are like 2 terabytes, 4 terabytes. I said, just plug it in here and plug it down there.
Well, I built an internal network using the ability to share your drives with other computers within your internal network, and that works, but it's slow. You can't edit with it. You can bring information in and out of it for admin purposes, but for editing, you're gonna start stuttering.
Yeah,
I can't edit off of media that's 50 feet away.
No, you need a jellyfish for that. That's right for LumaForge.
Yeah,
they're the ones that also would know about stuff like that. I mean, I don't know. I don't have the need for it, so I don't. Me
neither. It's like I don't want to hear the word star topology in my life. It's too complicated. I need a real fast pipe to my main edit machine that's in the house. I need audio and Ethernet out to here, because this is the voice booth and this is where I track stuff all the time to feed to the main system. But outside of that, I want the simplest wire diagram I can manage. And in fact, I used to use Omnigraffle. That was one of the things that I love the Omnigraffle, the program for. It lets you design wiring diagrams really simply and just drag out lines and connect them to things. And so part of my discipline used to be, if I'm thinking about wiring something to something, I would think maybe I'll just take this into Omnigraffle and see what the paths look like and see if there's any way I can eliminate 70% of it to get down to just a couple of things.
So also very useful for mapping out database schema.
There you go. If you do any Ethernet wiring,
I didn't know about that one.
Use Cat 6 for sure for more future proofing for the wire itself. I've got that. So
they'll sell you Cat 7 now.
Do they? Who's been to WWDC? I've never been there. Nobody? So this year they have a virtual one. They've had months to prepare for it. You know Apple, they're rehearsing. I guess they're going to have a couple different places that people are going to be, that they're going to connect virtually live, not just one place, right? I presume.
I have no idea.
I presume.
I mean, most of WWDC is way too esoteric, and there's usually about maybe 3 sessions that are relevant. When you can have always been able to watch the sessions, same day.
Right.
So
exactly.
I guess that we're just going to get keynotes and state of the Mac as presentations rather than with an audience.
As somebody said on a big Zoom meeting.
Oh, go ahead.
As somebody said in a big Zoom meeting I was in earlier, one-to-many is easy. Many-to-many is very hard.
Yeah.
And that's where you get into this kind of difficulty. If you want interactions, and in fact, there was a large discussion this morning about the I'm going to use the word again, the topology of like breakout rooms and things like that Zoom has. That really does add a lot of complexity to things, because now you've got some people who have bi-directional connections, other people do not. Whoever's hosting and controlling has to get another layer of administration thinking on top of this. And it just starts getting more and more complex the bigger you go. So to just virtualize what WWDC used to do, and this is just me imagining it, I don't have any expertise that are special in this area, but you would think that was the ultimate. We're going to all get together, and the C-suite at Apple is going to present our big global themes. Then we're going to break out. And right there, I'm going, oh, now you got a problem virtualizing, because you've got this possibility of people wanting to go to this track, but not those 2 tracks, or I want to go to 2 tracks at the same time and I can't. And suddenly the management of the information flow becomes logarithmically more difficult.
Except that WWDC is 2 things. One, it's a lot of presentations, not only the big keynote presentations, but all the breakouts where you have 3 or 4 or 5 things going on that are very subject specific and very much not C-suite. I mean, the people who are actually the engineers working on that particular project, by and large. The other part, and that's that I think is easily virtualizable, because everything is one-to-many. What's not is the workshops where you could actually go in and sit with an Apple engineer who will look at your specific problem and work with a small group to solve the problems. That I think can't be virtualized.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were talking, and my wife is a former school teacher and became an instructional specialist for districts, and we used to have a little product that we sold into that world, and it was complicated in that suddenly when I was thinking about California, because I live here now, and I was thinking about them saying we're going to go and take all of our high schools and grade schools and do online learning, I was going, oh, wait a second, man. And so I just looked up. There's like 7,000 grade and high schools in California. Each of them that's 8 or 12 grades and each of those has 3 classes, and each of those classes has 25 to 30 students. The amount of sheer bandwidth necessary, if you do that math, to go back and forth that many times is ridiculous. And so let's imagine that in some magical thing on 2 weeks from now, California schools, we're not talking about U.S., we're just talking about California, go live for live interactive teacher to student interaction, your old class, Mrs. Johnson's going to teach you, and you can raise your digital hand and ask questions. That is ridiculous amounts of live real-time video bandwidth suddenly being flooded through, and I don't know who the really big guys are, AWS, Akamai, can the infrastructure even handle something like California, let alone?
Well, they had issues with streaming WWDC. They had growing pains in the past, and they seem to have gotten by them when Apple does things. I guess the reason I brought up WWDC was I know it's not usual, but could there be a Final Cut Pro announcement at WWDC this year? And not necessarily a big one, but I mean, they mentioned last year when they had the Mac Pro announcement. Okay, the Mac Pro is coming out later this year, and they announced there would be an update to Final Cut in the fall for the Mac Pro, which they delivered on. But I'm just wondering if, because of the way NAB was canceled and stuff, if there might be some Final Cut Pro news, even a little tidbit. Even a little bit.
It could be, but I wouldn't hold your breath based on the fact that mission criticalness of this communication in this brand new, there's a lot more information that is critical beyond that servicing of those of us who are interested in that thing.
No,
I'm not saying they wouldn't.
No, there's
do
not.
It.
No, we're the most
important thing. Yes,
go ahead, Phil.
The thing is, when they have made Final Cut Pro 10 announcements around these times, it has been in support of something of Apple's technology. There was a preview of Final Cut Pro 10 released the day before the summit one year because it showed the touch bar technology.
Right.
There was another one, brief mention in there. The Mac Pro, it's because it's supporting the new Mac Pro.
Right.
So if there is a technological announcement at WWDC that Final Cut Pro 10 would be building on, but we're talking about a developer conference and finished product. These two are at the opposite ends of the chain.
Absolutely correct, Phil. Yeah.
So I'm not expecting something at WWDC. On the other hand, it is roughly the time of year when we'd expect something. So
right.
I think if I were Apple, I wouldn't do it at WWDC. I mean, they're expecting millions of people at all levels. I don't know.
But what they've done in the past, as Philip said, is they announced it the day before the Creative Summit, and they've done the same thing at NAB. They've done it right around there, but not actually part of it.
But remember, the Creative Summit was positioned so that the date it would be the day after the announcement. So that was a deliberate ploy around something that Apple were already doing, and FMC moved the conference to match it.
It's not that they need.
I got to leave, everybody. Thank you all very much. I've got my wife is poking her head and going.
Oh my gosh!
Clients that we have to do things.
Yeah,
for.
That's fine. I think anything else you want to talk about, you can go ahead, Bill. We'll take care of stuff.
See y'all later. Bye, all my friends.
Thanks for stopping in, Bill. Thanks for stopping in.
If everybody downloads the developer app, you'll get notified through that. And I think there might be a good possibility that they make the WWDC an Apple TV event so that it's more accessible to people, because I think they're going to open it up to more people than the normal, just small developer community.
But remember, WWDC has been sold out for like 10 years. So it's really been, the vast majority of people have, as have we, have looked at the sessions that are of interest. And that's how I found out that QuickTime was dead. We looked at a particular, 10 years ago, a particular WWDC video, and 4 minutes in, I turned to Greg and said, QuickTime is dead. And that's what the implication was. And so, but it was in the video. I didn't have to be at WWDC. The only advantage of being physically at WWDC, dub, let's just call it like that. That's what we call it internally.
Absolutely.
Dub is the interaction with other developers, which, that's the whole NAB with friends and other people, serendipity that Bill was talking about. But then there are the workshops. Now, the vast majority of people don't go to Dub, but they still see the videos afterwards. They don't get to participate in the workshops. Nobody's going to get to participate in the workshop.
Right.
So everybody's Dub experience is now the same as we were having previously. But so it's not really opening it up that much more unless you really wanted to watch something in real time. And frankly, most people don't watch stuff in real time. They watch it on recorded or on demand.
I'll be, yeah.
I think they're going to do it differently this year. My sense is that it's going to be opened up more than it has been in the past. I may be completely
how
wrong.
do you open it up more than it has in the past, Serena?
Because it's not going to, I mean, I register for WW every year and I can never go in person. So I end up watching it after the fact. But what Apple has announced today is that they're making it available to millions of people around the world, to the press, and to and I have to read the, that they're making it more accessible to not just the developer community. I may have read it wrong because I read it so quickly because that happened on here.
The most important thing is that it's irrelevant if you're not a developer. I mean, other than the keynote and State of the Mac, which of course we watch religiously.
Right.
Absolutely everything. If you've ever watched any of the other videos, unless you read Swift, unless you understand Swift, it makes no sense whatsoever.
But State of the Mac's pretty cool. That's what I watched.
State of them, but that's been a live keynote stream for the last
exactly.
And so so I'm curious to see how they can possibly make it more inclusive than it already was.
Yeah, I think that if you're a trainer, you're interested. I'm interested because like I said, I'm an information junkie.
Yep.
I want to know.
How much Swift do you know?
But I don't need to know Swift in order to watch what's happening. No, I can understand a certain amount of coding, and I want to see what's happening with it just for my own intellectual development. There's a part of.
I'm going to be a little rude.
See what I'm saying?
How many WWDC videos of actual coding sessions have you watched?
I've watched a few of them. Because I learned from them. Maybe I'm an anomaly. I'm probably an anomaly.
Not just the State of the Mac and the keynote.
Yeah. Well, because I want to dive deep, and I go, oh my God, I don't know this. This is kind of interesting. Well, and I learned just a little bit. But anyway, that's just me.
This WWDC is since we didn't have any NAB stuff from Apple, zero, because of the whole situation. I'm hoping for something with having to do with the like State of the Mac, Final Cut Pro, something, even if it's just around a WWDC. Even if it's just around.
Here's Apple's wordings. Apple today announced, this is straight from Cupertino, it will, and this is what I didn't have time to really read, but the impression it made is actually, it says, Apple today announced it will host its annual WW conference in June. Now in its 31st year, blah, 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 will take on an entirely new online format, packed with content for consumers, press, and developers alike. So they are broadening it, and there will be, and they're going to talk about the future of iOS, iPad iOS, Mac OS, Watch OS, and TV OS, and engage with Apple engineers as they work to build app experiences. So I think, Philip, you are right, and I'm right. We're both right.
There you go.
They are going to keep the track for developers. They're going to keep diving deep for you guys that really need to know Swift in detail. They're going to make it accessible to people like me that just have a curiosity about it, but they're also going to start to involve consumers, which I find to be very interesting. I don't think this ever would have happened on Steve Jobs, but I think that the Apple culture is slightly changing.
I think 15 years after he died, we can't really predict what Steve Jobs would or would not have done in a changed world.
Probably. I
think
any reference to Steve Jobs is almost like a reference to Hitler.
But it takes a long time to change a corporate culture. It takes many, many years.
They started doing that while Steve Jobs was there. He changed the corporate culture to make sure it would. I mean, the whole Apple University. Which basically codified what Apple was doing into an education system that is educating the next generation. Apple's corporate culture has freed up because every corporate culture reflects to some degree the person at the top, but doesn't mean that it's changed beyond its DNA. I don't think Apple's DNA has changed at all.
Yeah. I'm going to have to hop off too.
Yeah,
Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much for stopping in this. Is it Wednesday morning? I can't keep track of the days. It's Wednesday.
I don't know.
It's going to be May in 2 days. May the 1st in 2 days. Oh, man.
Yeah. Mayday.
Everybody stay safe. Everybody take a walk. Do you walk, Philip? You walk?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my balance to working on the computer is to go out and work on my yard.
Exactly. I have an acre and a half. I feel you. They had my girlfriend started her garden, and we've been tilling and stuff. So.
Oh wow, yeah, ours is like sloped like this, so. and the rabbits and other rodents are probably not going to let me have a garden.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh!
We have a deer
Philip,
fence
I
up.
planted my garden. I so carefully cultivated from seed all these vegetables. I planted my garden, and I couldn't figure out why everything was disappearing. And I saw a rabbit in the yard
Of course,
yesterday.
deer fence. Get a deer
Valid.
fence up.
All right.
Yeah, we have no
All right.
fences anywhere and can't have one. So
there you go.
I'll go ahead and enjoy it. Bye.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for stopping in, everybody. Talk to you later.